So far, we've discussed how to place three-dimensional furniture objects, and basically we just learned how we could load the three-dimensional families and how to properly place them in the project. Now, I'm going to tell you a very important point, which is that in all of the large projects that we work on, we usually turn off the visibility for the three-dimensional objects, and we proceed with the rest of the project by having the furniture objects in 2D. You probably can already guess why, which is that the three-dimensional objects will take up a lot of space and will make your file a little heavy. Therefore, it's going to be hard to work with. So in order to have a smaller file in size, we usually turn off the three-dimensional families, and we keep going with the rest of the project, with the furnitures being in 2D. Now, you might wonder, why don't we just do that in the first step? Why don't we just place the families in two-dimensional in the first place? And the reason is that we usually deliver several plans and files for a project, and sometimes we even deliver the actual Revit file to the client. Not to mention that some clients actually don't really pay attention to the Revit file, but instead they prefer AutoCAD and the CAD file. But some clients actually require the three-dimensional Revit files as well, where they might be needing them to observe some things and areas in the plan. Most of the time, we actually do deliver the Revit file as well, but some of our own clients don't really use Revit. On the other hand, the clients that actually work with Revit and care about the structure of the files will be needing them. Now, let's get to the reason why we place the three-dimensional furnitures in the first step. Well, number one, it's because we're going to be needing the three-dimensional look of all the furnitures put together. And now imagine that you've placed two-dimensional families, but then when your client creates some sections to take a look at the three-dimensional look, they'll see that there isn't any. So that's not going to be good for the visual aspect of your project, mainly because once you place your furnitures, that's when your project looks more realistic. Otherwise, it would be empty and it's not a good look. So we're going to be needing to place the three-dimensional families. But once the file becomes large in size, we're going to have to turn off the visibility for the three-dimensional furnitures in the plans to make the file lighter with the 2D objects and make it easier to work with. Now, how do we get those two-dimensional families? Like, do we need to create detail items? Or say, do we have to look them up? Because as you may already know, we do have some two-dimensional families like in Revit City or BIM Object. The two-dimensional families are also downloadable, like you may have two-dimensional toilet families. So there actually are some families which are only in 2D and not three-dimensional. But then again, you can also go ahead and create them by yourselves, and it's actually much easier because it's just lines. But we're not going to be doing that here, and instead we're going to be using the furniture drawings we have in their own AutoCAD files. So for example, let's go take a look over here in the first floor. We're going to go onto this AutoCAD file, based on which we've placed the furnitures. So obviously they have the furnitures in 2D, and we're going to be using those for Revit. For instance, for the part where we had an Eastern toilet, we could use this family, and we could use this one for the Western toilet. So do you see how easy it would be? It's also very practical. But for instance, for families like the amphitheater chairs, we didn't use these drawings over here for the Revit file. We actually could, and there would be no problem, because in the two-dimensional plans, all that matters is their locations. And as for the 3D, we've already placed them like that, using that method we learned together. But instead of these, we created an amphitheater seat detail item, and we used those for the 2D. That looked even nicer, and we're going to practice it later. But overall, how can I use these drawings for the other families in the project? It's actually really easy. I could just go over here and create a CAD file, only for the first floor. But then I would also have to remove some things from it. Like, I only want to keep the furniture and nothing else. So I'll have to delete some things. First, I'm going to select this one, and then I'm going to isolate it. I'm going to isolate it and see what will be left. And as you can see, only the amphitheater seats will remain from the project. That shows that in this project, the furnitures are not properly categorized. Now let me also tell you that we do the same thing to bring the architectural items into the project, as well as for the mechanical items. So you see, for example, these objects are mechanical, and so are these. We're going to need those in two-dimensional as well, but in separate files. So basically, we would have the architecturals in one file and the mechanicals in another. We'll talk more about that later on. Okay, so like I said, I'm not going to be needing some of these objects here, so I'm going to have to delete them. So for example, I'm going to isolate this and delete. Then I'm going to go over here and turn the layers back on. And I'm going to be keeping some elements like the grids, because I'll need the elements to be placed right where they need to be. But for some other stuff like this one, I'm going to isolate it. We're going to isolate it and delete. Then we turn the layers back on. And then I'm going to go and take a look at the layer properties, where we can see that we do have a fur layer. That's short for furniture. And what I'm going to try to do is I will select all of the layers here. And then I'm going to turn off this layer. Alright, now I'm going to turn the furniture layer back on real quick and see what it has. So you can see that it's not much, because the furniture objects are blocks and they're not layers like these. They have different layers. So now I'm going to go over here and turn the layers back on. And we're going to need to put some time to separate the furniture items. So for instance, I'm going to isolate this one and see that it doesn't have what I need, so I'm going to delete all of it. Then we turn the layers back on and say I'm going to isolate this one now, then delete everything in it. So we're just going to keep isolating and removing the extra parts. And I'm going to isolate this one now, then delete everything it has. And we're going to keep going until we are left with only the furnitures. So I'm going to continue until it's done, but you can go ahead and fast forward if you like, and go further to where the file has become less crowded, and then you can continue watching from that point. But if not, you're always welcome to stay, and we continue together. Also, it's not really complicated. All I'm doing right now is just making the file less crowded, and just removing the extra parts that I don't need to be part of the furnitures. Now we don't need these hatches either, so we delete those as well. And then I'm going to go over here to delete these lines. And don't forget that what we are removing for now will be used later on in the project, but at this point we only need the furnitures. Now we delete the ducts. And remember that you could also go over here and delete the layers from this menu, but I'm doing what's easier for me. So for instance, we don't need this one. And you see, what we're doing right now, I feel like it's very practical for the projects, and I myself really like to do it, because then not only we make sure that the families we have in Revit look exactly like they do in the AutoCAD, but it also ensures that we have a lighter file. So overall, I feel like this is a really good method to go with. I also recommend that if you are working on some very big projects, you put the time and do this exact same thing for your file as well. Now the only thing here is that I'm not going to be using these drawings and objects for the washroom families, because we usually keep the bathroom items on in Revit. So we only turn off furniture items like these, but the bathroom items will stay on, and the others will be in 2D. Now the reason is that the bathroom is a water area, as well as the kitchen and stuff like that. So the pipings usually stay on and the furnitures will be turned off. You might also notice it where we also keep the flooring for those water areas and the furniture plants. Overall, it's a whole nother different story for the bathrooms and the kitchens. And for now, we're only focusing on the furnitures. Okay, so I'm going to delete these. We don't need them. And I'm going to keep these items. And as you can see, I am also deleting the mechanical items because I'm going to be needing them in a different file. Now I'm going to delete these. And I'm going to also delete these items here. When we go further, we're going to talk about these as well. And we will see what we need to do about the terrace greenery. Okay, now let's turn the layers back on. And I'm going to isolate these lines. we're going to select and delete all of these. We don't really need any of it. And also as for these grids dimension lines, we don't need them either. Remember that we do need the grids themselves, but their dimensions aren't very useful for what we are intending to do. So we could just drag over all of them and delete. I'm going to also delete the section lines. So just make sure that you remove the extra parts you don't need and make your plans less crowded, leaving only the furnitures. Now I'm going to delete these as well. Then I'm going to delete the columns. And also there are some quicker ways to removing the extra parts. For example, we could use the quick select palette. But basically there are some other better and faster ways of selecting and deleting these items. But I'm going to go with this for now. Now I'm going to select this one, select all the other dimension lines, and delete them. And we also don't need these codes. Nor do we need these items here. And as for this whole area, we don't need any of it. Next, I'm going to delete these. And overall, note that we're going to be using the AutoCAD files that we receive from the clients very often. So it's not like their only benefit is to link them into the Revit projects and use them as patterns for placing items. Actually, a lot of times we figure and gather a lot of the information that we don't have by observing the corresponding AutoCAD files that we have available. Okay, so here's the finished look. And let me delete these as well. And as you can see now, we have less items. And as for this one, it's also extra. Let's also delete these lines. And as of now, we're only left with the furniture items. Now I'm going to save this file. And then I'm going to go over to this floor plan and import that file in here. But I'm going to hide this one for now. Then I'm going to go over here. And can you guess what we're going to turn off? We're going to turn off the categories of furniture and furniture system. So we're going to turn off their visibility to make them no longer visible in three-dimensional. So as you can see, they're all invisible now. Now because this AutoCAD file is of the same name as the one I'm going to be importing, I'm going to have to go over here and I'm going to rename this new file I just saved. And first I'm going to close it from AutoCAD. Actually, before I close it, I'm going to make one more change to the file, which is that I'm going to select everything here and I'm going to change all of their colors to red, for example. Or you could select any other color that you want to have in your plans. Then we're going to save this, close, and then we're going to go over here and rename it to, for instance, fur and first for the first floor. You'll need that for all the floors. Now we go to import CAD and we're going to select and import that file. Now I'm going to hide this one real quick. Okay, now I'm going to go over to the visibility graphics window and turn off its visibility altogether. And now here it is. I'll set this to foreground. And then I'm going to isolate it. Alright, so now that it's been positioned in the right place, the next thing we're going to do, in case you haven't set the midpoint for the plan, it's best that you keep the grids. But because mine was adjusted in AutoCAD, I could have also gotten rid of the grids. So now I'm going to do it. We used Quarry to remove the grids. And now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to explode it. But the thing is that right now we've got some lines which seem to me they are graphic. But anyway, I'm going to delete them just in case. And then I'm going to select this AutoCAD file and I'm going to full explode it. Now once we explode this file, can you guess what the items will turn into? They will become simple lines because now they are two-dimensional. So now they will be identified as sets of lines. Now that we've exploded it, we're going to drag over it to select the whole thing, and we're going to group these. And as for the name of that group, we're going to make it furniture of the current level. So like now that we're in the first floor, we're going to name it first floor. Then click OK. So right after you explode your file, you're going to have to group the items. Now let's see what happens when I de-isolate this plan. And as you can see, this is what it will look like. So basically, we've used the furniture items we had in AutoCAD and put them in Revit. And now I'm going to have to hit VG and turn off visibility for the generic models as well, to also make those invisible. So there we go. So we said that we are keeping the bathroom items in 3D, and we're going to be using the AutoCAD version of the families for everything else. Now if I go over to the 3D view, I will see the furnitures I've placed, and so the amphitheater seats are still here, but they're invisible in the floor plans. As you know, in the plans, views, and sections, we define different templates for each category. The reason is because some of the graphical settings, the scale levels, and stuff like that are going to be different for each plan and discipline. Now the plans are also divided into plans of furniture, flooring, etc., and they all each have a certain template, which save us from having to adjust every single little setting from scratch. Now I'm going to set up the settings for this plan, and then I'm going to make a view template of it and use it for the other plans. Then these settings will also be applied to those as well. So do you see how easy this was? You can see that we have a nice result, everything's organized, and the furnitures have a good look. And now it's up to you if you'd like to also change their colors. Or you could select one of them and check the line style, and if you'd like you could change it to anything else. And if not, you can always go over here to the line styles window, and then for this line style, you could, for instance, choose a different color, for example this one, and make it a lighter shade. Now why didn't everything else change color? The reason is that those were different. So what should we do about it? It is best that we drag over this whole thing and select them, and change all of their line styles to the same thing. But again, that actually depends on whether you'd like your furnitures to appear in a different color in your plans, or for example, for when you want all of your furnitures to appear a certain way. For example, for this project that we were working on, we made all the furnitures red, like this. Now you're allowed to have a different opinion, and for example, you might want them to be in a darker shade. Or you could even change their line styles and have them all in a color you like. So that way you can very easily grab the two-dimensional drawings of your furniture items in AutoCAD, then bring them over to Revit, explode them, and right after exploding you could group them all together. We usually have a group for each one of the levels and projects, which in fact contain the furnitures of the corresponding levels. We would be doing the same thing for the mechanical objects as well, as in we would separate them from everything else, then bring them to the project. In fact, we import the AutoCAD file, then we explode and group them, and for instance we name them MEP furniture of some level. It's as simple as that. Now it's also best to have the furnitures in separate files. For instance, the MEP furnitures are in one color and the architecturals are in another. Therefore, it's best to separate the groups so that you could also easily apply the graphical changes you need to make to them. So remember to keep that in mind for whenever you're working on the furnitures of your projects.